1:35, I'd like to open the meeting. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silence. I'd also like to bring to your attention the passing of Roland DuPont, who was a long-serving member of the Assembly of Delegates, as well as a county commissioner. He was a friend, a colleague, and an opponent. I have deep respect for him, and I hope you join me in that respect. Thank you very much. This is now the time for public comment. We will allow 15 minutes altogether, and we will allow 3 minutes for anyone who wishes to participate. Is anybody for public comment? Yes, sir.
May I reserve the right to comment later when we hear that about this program,
Of course, yeah, right. There should be a general discussion with our intention to allow some public comment on that.
And I just did want to ensure that you got the email that I sent in relation to the same discussion.
I did get the email, but I don't have a copy of it with me here.
Okay. I just wanted to ensure that you got it. Do you have a copy here? No. I don't have an extra copy, unfortunately.
At the time, you could perhaps bring it.
Okay. I'll bring up the same.
All right, so with that, we'll start on a discussion of that topic, proposed pesticide and fertilizer, pesticide and herbicide inventory. I had asked to bring that on the table because I had some questions on that matter. And my questions, well, first of all, if any of you have any questions.
I'm not sure what the question is.
Well, we're having a discussion.
We're
having
an update
right.
on
proposed.
It's a proposed pesticide.
It's for funding, yes. It's funding for a study that we discussed a couple of weeks ago, and this is a study to establish a baseline of pesticide and nitrogen use fertilizer, so that we can establish standards from which to measure success or failure.
So we put together a supplemental budget ordinance,
Yes.
$35,000, funded out of the year-end statutory reserve, which is about $250,000. So that is here.
Thank you.
That'll be, assuming you guys approve it and finalize, will be submitted to the assembly at their, when's their next meeting? Next week, I guess.
Next week, yes.
Well,
Next week is
The 20th.
Yes, the 20th.
July
It's a week from
20th.
today. Yes, the following week we don't have any.
Yeah, I know.
okay. Let me.
I was thinking about August. I'm way ahead.
Me too. I almost said August 3rd.
I know,
but it's
I did
next,
too.
so.
Thanks.
Okay. Did you have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. Here's my questions. We are facing an issue that has to do with, accessing strategic reserves. And because of that, and because of what I would call, what I would anticipate some resistance to releasing strategic reserves this early in the fiscal year, I felt that in looking at the plan design that I saw, that many of these things could be done by AmeriCorps volunteers, especially since it's identified as being an environmental project. Doing that would reduce the impact, or perhaps eliminate the impact of our cash reserves, or the use of strategic reserves to complete the project. I had noticed in the plan design that was submitted that you had already anticipated the request for a 1/4 FTE AmeriCorps intern, and since the AmeriCorps, as I remember from the dim past when AmeriCorps was proposed, AmeriCorps was proposed to be a program that would provide volunteers who had the ability to provide management expertise with regard to environmental projects, and this seems to follow in that. The other piece is that since this is, as I read this, an inventory of both retail stocks as well as what's being used by different programs all on the Cape. And you say here that it could be under the project management of the Cape Cod Commission. This seems to be a way of reducing our exposure with regard to cash and use volunteers that are already on our essentially on our payroll. So I wanted to put that out there before we went over there, because I already know, for example, that the Assembly, or one particular member of the Assembly, having heard that reserves were being accessed, has already started with a request for something else not related to this, for accessing that. And I think that if we're going over there with it, we need to be sure that we have a defendable position with regard to this, especially since strategic reserves are involved. So that's one part of the issue. The other part is that we have assets and resources in the other departments, and they're very in touch with some of the places that you mentioned here. The cooperative extension, the health department are all in contact with golf courses, agricultural applications, and there's contact between the health departments and the municipalities with regard to this. And I wonder if some of that information isn't already available, and just it means someone who, with direction from the commission, that could gather this. And it seemed to me that an AmeriCorps volunteer could be an ideal candidate, and we could get this project done. Based upon the timeline that you have, the AmeriCorps volunteers would be available, and I think this would be a useful application of the process, because this does not say that they're supposed to have conclusions on applications. Your work plan suggests that you're just getting inventories of materials, and the Cape Cod Commission would draw a conclusion later on. So, having said that, I just would like to get a response on that before we go forward.
I guess if I could start with the last piece first, in terms of what we expect to get out of this project. It was my anticipation that the consultant would put together a project report at the end that would create recommendations for ways to reduce pesticide and fertilizer use across the Cape based on user category. They would also establish best management practices, and per your prior email, Bill, you're correct. We already have established some best management practices through cooperative extension or health, but this would be somebody who would pull these all together, perhaps make sure that we are up to date in terms of best management practices recommendations, and package those so that they could be part of a public education campaign that was in the fourth step in the 4-point plan. With respect to AmeriCorps, it's too late at this point to apply for another AmeriCorps volunteer. We had applied and were awarded one person 2 days a week, and that person will be shared with our Pathways project as well. So we have a person 1 day a week, maybe 1.5 days a week from AmeriCorps that we could put into this effort. I also wanted to note that we have a APCC intern, which is free to us, which is a almost $8,000 value. It would do the task 1 piece, which is literature review. And then just finally, by way of background, I have forwarded this scope to both Bill Clark and George Hoyfelder back in March, again in June before it came to you. We have had some discussions about it, and I don't want to speak for them, but it's my impression that they really don't have the staff to dedicate to this kind of an intensive study this year. So that is the reason why we're asking for consulting money. I think we really need a professional to pull all of this together. And I appreciate the fact that AmeriCorps could do that, but we're too late on the request cycle this year, and I believe that the project would benefit from a consulting professional to really pull it all together.
If I can, I want to go back to last week, and why is her name escaping me?
Eileen Gunn.
Eileen Gunn was stating that, she's eager to go forward and have results happen, and there's a lot of information out there, and we could just start implementing different practices such as friendly lawns or whatever Falmouth had done. And this is really to establish a recommended best practices and ones that we can measure and enforce, and to see where our success is. I think that we all have different projects that come forward and they make a great impact, but over time they lose their sustainability and people start reverting back to their old practices, or new people who come on to the Cape weren't here when that effort was going on, so they really weren't part of it, nor have they been brought into it. Where this is something that we can actually establish a baseline of where we are and how are we going to reduce, and then be able to have something to measure our success rate. And I think that it's something that can also be, I don't want to jump right in here, but I think ultimately what you would like to do is be able to take this information and roll it into the regional policy plan as actually established regulatory recommendations.
The concept from our perspective is pretty simple. I mean, we know that we are using chemicals that are either harmful or potentially harmful in bulk everywhere. And what we want to do is identify that, be able to develop a matrix where we can measure that, and then set goals for reducing that Cape-wide over time. So we spent a lot of time on the scope, and we used, we did apply for AmeriCorps volunteers, and they are participating in the project. We have got the Whitlock intern from APCC. But there are aspects of this that we're going to need, I think we would benefit from some outside professional help, especially in what can be at times a very polarized discussion. I mean, we look at the ad hoc committee process from last year, introducing some objectivity, I think is a good thing rather than having it handled in-house. And so that's what we put forward, but and ultimately we'll try to find a way to do it however we need to do that. But I mean, what we've done is suggest the best plan that we think will be effective, and if you're not inclined to do it, the Assembly's not inclined to do it, then we'll try to find another way to look at it.
I have a question. Of the 62,000, is that the number, 62, 67 total thousand?
Yes.
Yeah. Of that, how much is allocated for monitoring? And would you say, is it set up?
The monitoring program that we're talking about with DAR is a separate
Is a separate
and
issue.
that's about $150,000
Oh,
in that
so
program.
so there isn't really monitoring per
No.
se in here.
No, there are no the well monitoring program is a separate program we've discussed with DAR. That's about $150,000, and we don't expect to ask. We would expect that the state will contribute that.
Right. That was in the budget, wasn't it? Did it get
No.
through
No, that's for wastewater.
No, but it doesn't
Oh,
mean
that's
it's
the
not there.
wastewater.
The DAR has certain funds that they might be able to use to support a monitoring effort. So we continue those discussions there. But this aggregate, and especially in a polarized discussion, I mean, it's what's been a little bit frustrating is that we've got some great advocacy organizations on the Cape, and they do a great job at highlighting these issues. But we're not an advocacy organization. I mean, if we want to sort of move the regional policy plan, it's got to be measurable. I mean, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so what we're trying to do is establish a process by which we can measure the quantum impact of this on the Cape now in a way that we can reduce it and all feel like we are actually making progress rather than just tilting at individual companies or agencies or whatever and feeling like there's been some victory.
That makes sense, because some of the comments that Eileen Gunn had were that the availability of data from Silent Spring, and I'm sure you already know.
Silent Spring would be a valuable partner going forward.
And the other comment she made was that she thought that the bulk of the funding, I'm just, getting
Yeah.
back what she had to
This
say,
was the discussion we
not
had.
my
No,
opinion,
you're right.
that she thought that we should really put more money into public outreach and public education.
I think public,
Because
yeah.
that's really where the issue is.
It is, but even on that, and I think you would know this more than others, if you look at Falmouth's Friendly Lawn program, it's very successful, but over time it was not sustainable.
Right.
And so even on the education and outreach piece, we have to come up with policies that are sustainable. And there are a couple of different options for making them more sustainable. Incorporating them into regional policy plan in some way might help us to do that. But having an annual measure is the best way to make sure that your programs are continuing to do what you want them to do. And so we, as a regulatory agency with really no authority on this issue, want to establish some measures, some aggregate measures over time so that we can see whether the policies and the best management practices that we encourage and put in place are having an impact long term.
See, yeah, and that really is the key, is the measurement. You're absolutely right, which is why it's good that you are doing it, because you know the need and the way in which it has to be measured in order to have being able to know whether it's effective or not.
Right.
So that's really good.
Well, the issue for me still remains.
It's still the money, but I think that's our issue.
Well,
More so than
no, I know,
policy issue.
I'm just bringing that up, but I would say that, and again, my suggestions were based upon how to get it done within, let's say within the limits and the capacity that we had, and to find out whether or not we really looked at that.
Yeah, I would say the financial decision is, we were here sort of reporting last week, and we've been out trying to look for other resources to fund this effort. We found some, and we will continue to find others. By the county stepping in with the $35,000, it allows us to expedite this process and get it done more quickly. That's really what it does. But if it doesn't mesh with the county's priorities for the use of the strategic reserve, then it doesn't. I mean, that doesn't make anybody a bad person, and that's your job, and that's the Assembly's job, and we'll live with whatever the outcome is.
Yeah, I think, Paul, the real issue for the Assembly probably was, and it came up when the budget is a concern about kind of this forecast of what the revenues may be. And so there may be some hesitancy, at least that's what I would imagine, about doing something in July when we're not quite sure what the revenue picture looks like.
And again, that's the basis of what motivates my concern with this. I hate to see a good idea die because because if you can anticipate where the resistance would be and figure out a way around it, then of course you can solve it. It's the objective, the identifying the objective, and then figure out whether it should be bypassed or should be attacked.
Regardless of the action by the Assembly, we'll continue to look for money to fund the project. The only thing that would happen, I think it's going to it's not going to die, but it could be delayed. And as you know, every January we have to, the NSTAR issue of spraying the rights of way is really the one that's raised awareness on this, and that's a deadline that comes every year, and we're going to have to deal with it. And if we don't have the resources to move forward and get the project done in a timely way, then we'll be at a disadvantage, but we're committed to work through it, whatever the reality is.
Okay, I think there was some interest.
Could I just say something? I think there are two things that are really important as to why we should fund this now. First of all, it's a high priority, and it's a Cape-wide issue.
It is.
And it's a public health issue as well. And secondly, timing is, I think, extremely important because NSTAR is not going to stop spraying forever. And they've already had 1 year of a moratorium.
Well, they may. We're working on it.
Well, and that's true. But at the same time, this gives more push to them to realize that this isn't something that is really appropriate to do here on the Cape. So I think it's very appropriate to use our funds for a regional project that has public health impacts and that has a high priority in terms of time. And I think that's the case we need to make to the Assembly.
Right.
They need to think that way too. Not so much about what's going to happen next June, or next January. I mean, there are other ways in which we would need. It's 35,000, so it's not huge. There are ways that we could, in fact, if we had to, adjust the budget going forward, but not to have to delay this project because of a potential budget shortfall at some time in this fiscal year.
Right, and also because we are at year end from 2011.
Exactly.
We know we have the 250,000 because we really set that aside, and you set it aside in cash essentially,
So,
as a reserve.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and for this particular purpose. And every town has voiced their concern either through the NSTAR issue, but this will also help them realize that this is that they're part of this issue as well. I mean, if everybody has recognized the problem, so this will give help to everyone in how can we all reduce this problem. So I think that it's necessary and it's our way of going forward.
Okay, with this, I think I'd like to open it up if anybody has any questions. Sue, you had a question?
First, I would like to,
Please identify yourself.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm Sue Phelan, and I will be representing Green Cape today. I wanted to know if it was possible to see the plan design that you got for the projects. Is that possible?
Sure.
We,
You have a copy there?
Bring it together.
You have mine?
yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also, I asked Eileen Gunn, who is one of our members, to come last week because I would not be able to make the meeting. And as you probably know, she has a very varied background and understands a lot of the issues surrounding pesticides and municipal planning and hydrogeology. But those, and this, the letter that I referred to earlier was a letter to you all that we had both written regarding some of the questions that came up about the proposal. One thing she did call my attention to is that there is a very current study by Horsley and Witten on the nitrogen loading. Actually, it's probably more of a literature search that was only completed 2 years ago, and it's quite thorough. And perhaps that aspect of the proposal wouldn't even be, needed to be covered at this point. Perhaps also MDAR could supply information about actual pesticide sales to cover the pesticide aspect of things. Also, as you probably know, we've been working with an individual from Marblehead who actually utilized a form of turf and lawn care in his area, and he was the head of the grounds up in Marblehead, and he actually not only transitioned all of the town properties, including sports fields, to a completely non-chemical program, and saved the town 25% at the same time. Now that 25% savings I don't think kicked in for about 3 years, but now they're seeing this significant savings long term. He has offered to Green Cape to come and speak on the Cape to any body that wishes to learn more about this technique, which is actually very simple. I think that if this body is interested in hearing him, I could arrange for him and Eileen to come and speak with you. It would be about an hour program, and then maybe you'd have questions afterwards. Anyone else actually, could attend, town officials or...
Yes, sure.
Is this his name?
Especially.
His name?
Chip Osborne.
Yeah, Chip Osborne. I had invited him. There was discussion trying to invite him last year, and I tried to get him for the ad hoc committee to
If
give
I
a
could
presentation.
mention, he specifically said he did not want to be involved with anything that was not lawn or turf care. It's a completely different maintenance program that would be used on rights of way. It would not be pertinent to the type of thing that he does. So he wanted nothing to do with that.
Well, I would be happy to have his. I think that he has an interesting tale to tell, and if he was able to get Marblehead to adopt these practices, that's all just good information. And as far as the Horsley Witten, I'm sure you have that, and we're not out to ignore work that's already done and on the ground, and so that will all be incorporated.
And I'd like to mention one other person, and that's Hyla Lyman. Hyla, H-I-L-A from Falmouth. She was began the Falmouth Friendly Lawn Program, and she has told me recently that she is very happy to do anything to help this project going forward. Anything that she could do to contribute, she would, or even to speak or whatever. So we could add her to the list of people.
That's great.
Is there anyone else did you have more to add to that? Sue?
Sue, could you email us Chip Osborne's contact information?
He
and
will
I'd be happy.
only...
He'll only speak to you?
I arrange all of his meetings on the Cape.
Okay.
I'm happy to do that, though.
Okay.
I'm not.
Does anybody else have anything to add to this topic? Okay. Do you have anything else to add to it?
No.
Okay. I would, then it would be appropriate for somebody else to have a motion.
Yes, I'll put a motion that we appropriate the $35,000 from the study.
And where's the motion have to include where the money's coming from?
That is coming.
It's all here, I'll record it as such. Yeah.
All right.
I'll second that.
And while it's open for discussion, I would just add that my concern is that I can anticipate a certain amount of resistance from the Assembly, and that this is a case where we better count the votes before we vote again.
Well, I think it's something that they were almost requesting, so it would be hard to imagine that they would all vote it down. I mean, I think it's in the interest of all of their towns that this go forward.
Well, I guess we'll find out.
And if they don't,
okay,
they don't.
We will plan our presentation to the extent.
Yes.
Let's put it that way.
I appreciate, yes.
Wouldn't they hold a hearing like there
Yes,
is
they will.
Oh, yeah,
next
that
week
would-
on that
yeah.
other ordinance? That would be an opportunity for people to reinforce.
Actually, we should request that we be put on their agenda just to discuss this. They can think about it if they want to vote on it,
Well-
then they can, or they can vote on it. Thank you.
I think that the hearing process accomplishes that. I believe we have to have a separate presentation. But I think it is appropriate for us to be present at the committee meeting.
Absolutely.
To speak to that. There is an opportunity for people that are watching who might have a concern about this issue to, that this is the time to be heard on it, and that another one of the motivations that I had in having them come in to talk about it, it is an important issue and one that deserves more visibility other than just passing it over to the Assembly and turning it over to them, seeming to give them the responsibility for carrying it forward. We do have a stake in this, and we want to make sure that this process continues.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we send a letter to all the towns, to the boards of selectmen, town managers. They have voted resolutions
Yes.
regarding NSTAR. So I think it would be appropriate to send them a letter and notify them that we have approved this ordinance, and that when the hearing will be, and we ask them to either attend the hearing or to send a representative or to write a letter in support.
Right.
Or something
I
like
think
that.
I will second that.
Well, we're still on the other motion, but I think that's a good idea, and I don't believe we need a motion on it.
Okay.
If you could bring such a letter and have it for us
Yeah,
next
that's
week.
good.
Okay.
You can meet,
Yeah.
Anyone else?
This is-
Yeah, we can
remember,
pass it all the way down there to the
As
back.
Just me, and I don't write letters.
As the Coast Guard officer in the back will tell you, there's a difference between delegation and dumping. There's a little bit of dumping in there.
Yes.
Okay, so with that, I'm ready for a vote.
yeah.
We're ready for a vote on this?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And thank you very much for
Thank you.
Yes, very good.
Okay.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
this moving.
the next item, and we're on time, I guess, is Andrew Gottlieb.
Yes, but he is
I'm here.
here.
Right here.
Goodness, I didn't
Here with his
You might
friend.
want to stay.
I brought a
He has
friend.
his friend.
Who's your friend?
It's Jackson.
Got through security?
Oh, Jack.
Got him through
Not
security?
Jackson's best side over here.
Oh,
There you
there's
go.
Jackson.
There you go. There you are on
So
TV.
look, and she's
I know that
posing
he's
now.
not
She's like, what are you
with the
speaking?
non-
Here I am, I'm beautiful.
You have to bring Dixie sometime.
So,
Dog day.
I mean, it's always good to have at least one friend.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it is, and as they say...
And then we're down to that here.
Yeah, look a little like Bill
need my
Clinton
dog.
these days.
All right, let's get back to the agenda. We're having a discussion with Andrew Gottlieb, Executive Director of Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative, on plans for the proposed Massachusetts Environmental Protection Agency review.
Okay, so, a year ago now, you decided to support a independent review of the MEP models. And after a lot of back and forth, with requests by a number of the towns to proceed to have this work done by the National Academy of Sciences, back last fall, what you decided to do in response to a letter from Orleans was to develop a proposed approach over the course of the winter and spring, so that in the event no funding were forthcoming from the towns, the county, the state, or the towns, the state, or the federal government to fund an NAS review, that the county would be in a position to make a decision about whether to proceed or not with its own review. So over the last several months, the governing board delegated the authority or the responsibility to the technical advisory committee, along with support from Mike Domenico, who's our technical consultant, to develop an independent approach to reviewing the science associated with the MEP. We have done that. We had recommended to you, and you had supported, and the Assembly ultimately voted to support a $100,000 line item to provide the funding to support this work, so the money's in place. The towns, the feds, and the state did not come forward with any money. So the county's the only show in town with money to support this. And I have for you today a recommendation just voted by the collaborative board that the county choose to proceed with the review as it had intended to do. We developed, as I mentioned, this review procedure with the support of the TAC. We put it out for a broad public comment period that exceeded a month. We accepted written commentary. We held 2 public hearings, one in Mashpee, one in Brewster. People had the opportunity to come tell us what they thought about it. The comments were referred back to the technical advisory committee. They were incorporated where there was substantive benefit to the comments into the proposal. We have prepared a response letter that will go back, depending on the outcome of your decision today, to everyone who commented to us on what we did with their comments, what the process was to date, what the process will be going forward, so that we'll, I think, hopefully have a process that people, whether they like the substantive outcome or not, can feel that it was a legitimate process. Their comments were heard and addressed in some thoughtful manner, and we took advantage of that public comment process. The structure of this proposal is that we would have a panel of people who have no stake in the game. They are qualified and experienced in the manners of nitrogen management, nutrient modeling, water quality, but are not participants in any fashion in the work that's happening on the Cape. We would identify a group of people. We would send them in advance this summer, if we choose to proceed today, a lot of information describing what's been done, the models, the data that went into it, the quality assurance and procedures, how the state uses the information, how the county uses the information, what our various roles are in developing the process, and send them all that information plus a list of questions that we want them to consider that all fit within the general framework of is the work that's being done on the estuaries project an adequate basis for towns to use as their management planning tool. Not what would you change if you had unlimited data and time and money, not is this accurate to the 100th degree, but is it good enough, is the sort of the nature of the questions we'd be asking them to answer. They would review the information before they came here. They'd have the opportunity to respond back to us and say, that's great, what about this list of information that you didn't provide us? We have these kind of questions. We don't think the questions you asked us are the right questions. What about these questions? So there'll be some opportunity to make sure that the people that when they finally get here, they come informed, they come knowing what they need to know in order to dig into the information and grill the people who are the practitioners. They would be here for a week. There's a structure of providing briefings to them from SMAST, from us, from the county, from the relevant DEP and EPA people on how this information is used, what their review procedures are, how the information is handled, and how it's processed. There'd be some site visits, so that they'd have the opportunity to go on site and see what types of resources we're talking about, because again, we're talking about people who aren't here practicing their trade on the Cape, so we want to make sure that they're grounded in what our resources look like. And then finally the thing would close with a session where they would present their initial findings back to the collaborative board, the governing board. They would follow that up with a written report in 6 weeks, and then that final report would be made available to the general public, and then people can think of it what they think of it. I don't know what it's going to say, but that's the process that we've outlined.
I didn't hear in the end part of that process that report would come to us first before it was distributed.
It would go to the governing board. I mean, the governing board would review it, and then it would come to you guys. I mean, the county's a client, I guess, is the answer.
To the public, I want to make that clear.
Right, the county is a client in this, and then it's up to the county to choose how to distribute it.
Yeah, well, we're the client, but we're doing this on behalf of, putting everyone at ease across the Cape. So it's not like, we're just wanting something to be told to us that we want to have told to us. We've also talked about, the degree of transparency and involvement of people who might not necessarily agree with any of it, any of what is proposed already or what may come out of this, so that they will have an opportunity to have their questions. We're going to reach out to them, and if they could identify the questions they want addressed, we will put that forward as well. Instead of, we could have a 3-day conference of just people hashing out their concerns and where their objections to what MEP is all about. So if they could consolidate those, and we'll make sure that they are included and addressed, and that there's even on-site visits and that sort of thing. So
This is a subject that we've been talking about for over 12 months. I believe that there's nobody that's on this board right now that isn't aware of the importance of it or the details, because these are sort of, to me, a summary of things that we've talked about at meetings for a long period of time. And it looks like we're going forward. There is a question with regard to, I think it's Orleans. There are some issues with regard to something that they're looking at right now named Namescape
Right.
Marsh and placement, but that doesn't have anything to do with this.
No,
Okay.
not a deciding decision.
Okay, and Orleans was also the one that had indicated that they were motivated to go forward.
Orleans asked you to support, initially Orleans said, we want to go NAS. The response was, first response, we don't think that's an appropriate way to go, that doesn't meet our needs and will address a lot of other issues. They came back with a slightly more nuanced request saying, we'd like to work on the NAS thing, and we'd like your support, but we recognize that the NAS thing can't be an open-ended conversation that never gets anywhere. Your response to that was, fine, we'll support your efforts to identify funding, but we're going to go ahead and proceed on a parallel basis so that we don't lose the time while you're looking for funding. We don't lose the opportunity and the time involved in that. So we'll proceed with this, which is what we've done. And you set a July 1 deadline for the funding from those other sources and said, Orleans, paraphrase, if you don't get funded by July 1, it's a dead issue, because we just can't let it continue on. And Orleans responded with a general agreement that that was an appropriate way to proceed. Everybody did what they said they were going to do. We went ahead and did a fair and open public process to develop this. We pursued and secured funding to support it. The town pursued through whatever channels it chose funding support. They were unable to get it funded. And so July 1's come and gone, and now I think the right thing to do is say, we're going to proceed or we're not going to proceed. The recommendation, unanimous recommendation from the governing board as of a half an hour ago was to proceed. And so we're bringing that question to you today.
Okay.
One other thing. The idea would be, if we decide to do this, we hold it in October. There's a lot of logistics that we're going to have to do to pull this off. There's a lot of information that needs to be put together that we have to start to do, and there's a lot of just, you need to reach out to people, clear people's schedules, get a place for them to stay. There's a lot to do between now and October, so we would be in that process tomorrow if you authorize us to proceed today.
Well, I guess maybe I may have missed this in your chronology, but just to clarify for myself, over time, well, back some months ago, there were questions that were raised by Orleans and a few other communities as well, and you have those. We know what those are.
Yeah.
But now questions are going to be given to these individuals who are going to review them.
Yeah.
Do you think, is there an opportunity for any new questions to be presented? Maybe some way in which some of the towns who now have learned more and may have come up with more questions to get those to
we will create an opportunity to solicit and convey those questions in an orderly fashion to the panel. I don't anticipate an open mic night.
I hope not.
We discussed this over
Yeah,
at
but
the meeting.
so-
How should we be able to open it up so that people's concerns are legitimately heard
They're up
without
to date.
losing control, and that they're
Right.
up to
And I
date.
think what'll end up happening is that, I want to find a way to convey the discussion that's out there and let the panel decide what's relevant and what isn't.
Okay.
It's not for us to, because I think to the extent that we are seen as screening those, that will be seen as a censorship and delegitimize the outcome.
Right.
If all the information gets conveyed in a way that's appropriate to people who are, providing their time to us, and they can say, this is legit, this isn't, then I think that's the appropriate way the process should
And they can
proceed.
explain why their reasons
Right.
behind that, instead of it coming from us.
Right.
There's another piece here, and I think that this is probably in these 6 years that we've been looking at this issue. It all comes down to, what is it going to cost me to participate in this as a citizen here? We've gotten some indications as to where the financing, what some of the financial models might look like. I don't know, based upon what you've said, as to whether or not the financial
No,
modeling would be...
this is solely a
Science.
review of the science.
All right, so
Right.
I think that needs to be clear.
It's narrow and focused.
So that when the questions come in, that they're based upon the application of water management as opposed to financial modeling, because and Paul has been very articulate and clear that when people look at issues with regard to the Cape Cod Commission and they're objecting to outcomes, there's a whole roster that
Right.
they go through. Okay, check this off. No, now we'll get to the next one. Get to the next one. So at some point, we do have to.
This answers the question, is the science upon which those management and funding decisions based legitimate?
All right, so
Only.
and that is the message that I think we need to get out to the
Right.
public, so that when they are asking questions about it, that's the focus that they have. Yes, Pat?
Well, they couldn't answer those financial questions anyway, because those are individual
These-
based on
yeah.
each town. So I think it's
Yeah.
Done
very
the science, it's
appropriate
bound
to
to
stick
check
with
with.
the science.
Right.
So the recommendation to you today is to authorize us to proceed with the review panel, and then we'll work on the details.
So as I understand it,
You didn't come for money?
Not,
Well,
I got the money.
there.
you already got the money.
That's why Mark's around.
Money's put aside. We have-
All right, so you're
Look at it.
asking us to approve a scientific review process, which will conclude with a
An independent peer review of
Independent peer review.
the adequacy of the MEP modeling as a basis for wastewater management on the Cape.
Okay,
Right,
and
which
and
we
you're going
already
to frame
approved
a
once.
motion
Yeah,
that
we've already
includes all of
approved
that.
We
We've
did
already
approve it
approved
once,
it.
and we put it in our budget for this year, so the
Yeah,
money
so
is
it's
there,
just kind of
approved,
an update.
appropriate,
Yeah.
now we're just going to
There's
appropriate.
nothing new here,
There's
but
nothing new.
we're completing the process we
Right.
told people a year ago we were going to follow.
Right, you're
Right.
sort of endorsing that we continue.
Yes,
So,
yes, and
then
there was a
without
big discussion
objection,
on that today.
then I don't think we need a vote. Without objection,
Do we-
thank you
yeah.
very much for that.
Yes.
Go forward.
Yeah.
Then we go forward and,
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Good
and,
job.
All right.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's great.
I think the hard part is ahead.
yeah, the hard part
Do
is
you need
ahead,
a friend with
especially-
you?
Take your little dog with you. The secretary.
Yeah, oh yes,
Going
tell
around
us
for
about the
that.
visit.
Yeah,
What?
just for
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
information.
We hosted a meeting, Paul and I and a number of local officials. We had an opportunity to have the DEP commissioners, 2 deputies on Cape for a full day, 3 Fridays ago maybe. And
Fridays.
no, actually, the commissioner had to go drop kids off at camp, so he left when he was done with us. But we had his undivided attention for 7 hours. We started off with a breakfast meeting with 4 selectmen, and where he was able to get an opportunity to hear from them what some of their concerns were, what they're dealing with. And I thought having the actual practitioners who are in executive positions convey to him both their commitment to this issue and the ways in which it's playing out in their towns is very useful. We went to 4 different sites with him as an opportunity to educate him on the seriousness with which the county is taking consideration of alternative strategies to manage wastewater, in addition to and to supplement any treatment and collection that needs to happen. We went to Parkers River Bridge site, where we're looking at that as an opportunity to coordinate with the Massachusetts Highway Department with a widening of the bridge abutment so that water quality in Parker's River and Swan Pond. Upgrading of it would improve markedly and provide enough capacity that the town of Yarmouth would be able to have one of its discharge locations in that watershed and still meet water quality standards. You can either widen the bridge and achieve those outcomes, or you can sewer everything in that watershed and not achieve the water quality outcome. Good opportunity to talk about how alterations in natural systems provided an alternative to, and also the ability to provide discharge locations. We went to the Mill Pond in Marston's Mills, which is a freshwater wetlands alteration that we're looking at to dredge out that freshwater system as to provide increased reduction of nitrogen before it hits the Three Bays system. Talked about some of the regulatory issues and concerns that we had and how we want to help work with them to move that project forward. I think that was pretty well received. We went to Bourne's Pond in Falmouth, have a conversation about what the opening there and a slightly different opening project would mean in terms of the town's ability to forego any potential collection and treatment north of 28 in the Bourne's Pond watershed, which provided enormous savings in phase 2 to Falmouth. Again, I think generally well received. And lastly, we went out on Papaneset Bay for 2 purposes. One, with the Mashpee Shellfish Officer, so they could demonstrate and display the shellfish cultivation process that he's doing as a part of a nitrogen control strategy. So we're able to go show him where our aquaculture takes place, how it takes place, and hear from the practitioner what his expectations were about nitrogen management that could come from that. A discussion about the role of that in Mashpee, Falmouth, Wellfleet. We're working on a broader project with all 3 towns on nitrogen management through aquaculture. And then we're able to, with Dr. House, do some core sampling in the Mashpee River that I think very clearly showed him what the impairment is. Not only the mat of algae and muck on top of the water, but the core samples that Brian was able to take that showed 4 or 5 feet of mud and sediment with no benthic community in it, and maybe an inch of clean sediment at the bottom of that 4-foot pipe. So I think we were able to give him and his key staff a lot of information about what's happening here, correct the record in his mind as to the county's commitment and work that's being done on things that are companions to treatment and collection, and really show an overall balanced approach for managing the issue and not being committed to one particular outcome. Because I think he had heard a lot of misinformation from people that all the county was interested in is pipes and pumps. And I think we were able, through showing him and having him meet with the people who are doing the work, that it's a way more sophisticated approach that the county is employing to managing this in a cost-effective way as possible, that goes well beyond the simplistic pipes and pumps approach that people are saying is reflective of our program. So I think he left here with a much deeper appreciation of the good work that's happening on Cape Cod and a really positive feel about what's happening down here.
I'm disturbed by 2 things. One, he never heard pipes and pumps from anybody in the county. Who was he talking to? And yet the second thing is, there's been an issue with regard to the capture of information that the state gets and not redistribution. Is there any conversation about about problems with distributing information that we get?
No, I mean, he hears information. I mean, he's a public person who's out there talking to people with different perspectives on issues all the time, wastewater and not wastewater. And so, we don't pretend to be the only channel of information. So he gets letters and meetings and hears from people all the time about, this is what's happening on the Cape. And I think we've been very fortunate in that he has demonstrated himself to be a committed and thoughtful partner with us since he began with the department, 4 or 5 months ago, and is really committed to hearing what we have to say. He's doing, I think, his due diligence to understand and get different perspectives. So, yeah, he hears a lot of stuff. Some of it's accurate, some of it isn't.
Yeah, I think you have to keep in mind that he's hearing from people in communities, and the county's position has always been consistent that any appropriate technology should be on the table. Mm-hmm. There are other groups out there that don't believe in that, that say that centralized collection in anywhere on the Cape is inappropriate. those people have traction at town meeting, and some of those people have proprietary interests in some of the technologies that they're selling. So, but I think once it raises to the level, gets to the level of commissioner, that stuff gets sort of filtered out. And so I think we've established a good relationship with that. Senator Wolf on Monday will be sponsoring the secretary to come down on a similar tour. So he'll be down on the Cape with the Senate President. And so I think the commissioner's involvement, the secretary's involvement, and the budget that the government just signed this week that had, a specific earmark for the Cape to look at regional wastewater management planning demonstrates a commitment from this administration, and as well as the House and the Senate, that wastewater on the Cape is a priority for the state.
Right, and the regionalization, the structured approach through the region, through the county, is the appropriate way to begin to think through some of these opportunities to efficiently and cost-effectively manage wastewater.
And I think if you read through some of the language associated with the earmark, it's really a confirmation of the leadership taken by the county on this issue.
So it's really good news, and I think that, I understand your concerns about, what gets said, but I think the thing to take comfort in is that, he has demonstrated a real openness and willingness to hear us out, to take on some complex issues, to look at the nuance and commit the personal time. Almost every commissioner in the last 15 years has come down here to look at wastewater and talk about this stuff. So I got a pretty good sample size of how well people pay attention. And I'm telling you, this guy was focused. He wasn't worried about other stuff that was going on in the office. He wasn't taking cell phone calls. And he was focused and engaged and thoughtful with us throughout the course of the entire day. And that's all you can ask.
That's excellent.
All you can ask.
Ken
Never
Kimmel.
mentioned his name, I know.
Yeah, Commissioner Ken Kimmel.
Yeah, so I'm really pleased with that, and I think, as Paul said, the recognition in the budget's the budget's as many things. It's as much a policy statement, a value statement, as any single piece of legislation that happens in a year. The fact that the legislature has now spoken affirmatively in support of and sanctioned and blessed what the county's been doing, and the governor's acceptance of it. I think we had a very easy process in conveying our interest to them, and really no pushback on signing. It was not hard to get that piece signed.
No.
Right.
All speaks to a good endorsement of the work that's being done down here and support for it, which we're going to need as we get into the hard nitty-gritty stuff.
Right.
Well, I just want to commend these two guys and really the team, because they are in everybody's mind they're trying to say that the county just wants to sewer, and it's clear that that this is really a multi-pronged approach, and it's an innovative approach. Nobody is saying that this is the answer. They are looking at all of these, trying to save money through natural attenuation and different alternatives. Alternately, the people who are saying that that's what we want to do are the ones that are there saying, well, if you just use compost toilets, then you'll never have to sewer. And that is part of a solution, but that's a solution in a certain area. And so I just want to, I think that you're developing a plan that could be a model for other communities. It's easy to say, well, we just have to sewer. It's hard to really think out of the box and look at all the different options that you have available to you, and to really study them and to see their impacts and where they're going to play in here. And I think you're just doing a really good job. So, and I'm very happy with where the progress is leading. And it seems like it's really got a good momentum.
So the subway, in conjunction with the with the main pipe that goes all the way down Route 6 to Provincetown, is out of the question now.
No, we're still working on that.
Yeah. And for anyone who's interested in learning more about eco-toilets, there's a seminar Saturday, begins at 9 o'clock.
And they'll say that that's
Did
the
Matt
east
Patrick
bound
involved in that? Did Matt Patrick involved in that?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Okay. Clevis Multrum is something that's been around for a long time, but
It's not the only one.
that's not
There's
the
like
only
5
one.
of
There's
them.
tons of them.
Right.
And every time I hear talk about the magic bugs, nobody tells me what happens with the mass that's created when the bugs eat one thing. The laws of physics are immutable. If you digest something, you create another byproduct. So nobody's told me where that stuff goes. And so far, and as I think you're aware, Judge, Hoyfelter and the Health Department has an alternate septic site evaluation center near the base, and so far we haven't got any consistent evidence that any of these alternate schemes actually work.
Well,
There's no magic bullet.
On that note, though, we, through the commissioner, had discussions now. We have, through RTDC and Bob Curson, found that the Living Laboratory, in conjunction with a partnership with MBL and Woods Hole, and he's had discussions with George, and I think the commissioner will be talking to George also about taking the IA system at the base, putting it with the Living Laboratory and Woods Hole, and maybe developing a place where we can certify alternative technologies for use in comprehensive wastewater management plans, and those test sites would be on Cape Cod, again, making us a leader in that, in sort of wading through all of those potential alternatives and picking out the ones that might work in certain circumstances.
We're very fortunate George is the health agent in
Right.
Falmouth.
Right.
No, he's
Health
on the
Department-
Board of
on the
Health.
Board of Health.
He's our health person.
And I
in the
believe,
county.
in Woods Hole, I believe most of those septic systems have been recently changed, so they should be.
In this
close to
Living
it.
Laboratory, it's 72 acres and 76 little
Yeah.
homes on it in 2 different areas, and they've got some natural sort of little river that runs through so there are a lot of opportunities. Some of them are on cesspools, I still think, but it's an opportunity to get sort of researchers that live there in the summer to use these technologies on a regular basis and get some real-time feedback from that. And just the final thing, I got off the phone with a reporter who's writing a piece on the 50th anniversary of the National Seashore, and you know, her question to me is it the most important piece of legislation for the Cape? And you know, I think, you know, my message to her was, I think President Kennedy planted a flag here 50 years ago about how special this place is. And there have been important pieces of subsequent legislation, whether it's the Cape Cod Commission Act or the Mass Military Reservation Cleanup effort, putting that under civilian authority, or the land bank, but all of those really play on the legacy that President Kennedy started 50 years ago. But now, as we face our most pressing environmental issue going forward, we realize that the economy is linked to the environment exclusively because of those first steps taken 50 years ago. It's time for the federal government to recognize the priority of the Cape as a national treasure and to help us solve this problem. So the step that the governor took this week was, I think, a strong statement by the state. We really need the federal government to step up and help us out.
Yeah, and we have to also thank Senator Wolf. He's done a great job in assisting us with
Senator Wolf and
all
Senate
that he's
President
done.
Murray,
And Senate President Murray,
have been
they've done a
tremendous.
great
The House
job.
delegation also has been very helpful moving
They've
this
done
forward.
a great job. But if I could just share, over the weekend, I was at a dinner party and a friend was telling us about visiting their friend who had a compost toilet in Maine. And if that story was told of how the maintenance of that, and I wasn't even sure how it could be ecologically sound, because somehow this particular system had a bag that had to be removed, put into another bag, which, you know, it doesn't biodegrade for another billion years, but it was an interesting process, and I'm not sure that, I mean, these are the things, that's why you have to have scientists live with these, people who are volunteering
Just
to live with
the
them. Just to-
$150,000 that's going to come out will allow us to sort of develop a matrix of all the potential alternatives that are out there, and in what circumstances those particular technologies might be successful.
Right.
And then we'll be able to apply them to a map. And I think it will get us beyond this discussion that somehow there's a magic bullet, there's one technology.
Well, and also that if you raise any concerns about its application in one area, you're therefore opposed to it.
Right.
In reality, its question is, where and under what circumstances are these alternatives appropriate, and in combination with what are the strategies?
Right.
Which is a, you know, complicated process.
Very complicated.
And people like to just sort of, when you say, well, not here, then they just sort of tune out and, well, you're against it.
No.
Right.
In reality, that's just, that kind of simplistic thinking doesn't move us anywhere.
Right.
So,
Well, you're doing the hard work.
From the
and you're doing a good
beginning,
job.
that's been exactly the policy. When we did the dog and pony shows around to the towns, that's what we said.
now, the county has been consistent throughout
Right.
in its view on this, and it's become, you know, more nuanced over time as we've learned more, but fundamental direction of having a multifaceted, sort of integrated approach to these types of questions has been where you started, and it continues to be where we are now.
Okay, so with that, do you have anything else for us?
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Well done, thank you.
Thanks. Toby?
Steve, we're now ready to,
Oh, good, thanks. Here's your.
are we ready to move the,
Oh, you were asking me.
Oh, yeah.
do you have any questions about the needs action or the summary of items?
No.
No, I'll move the summary of items.
There's somebody here that wants to put it down.
We'll
Okay,
finish
we're
with
gonna
this.
finish this and then.
Okay, we'll finish this. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's passed. And that includes the minutes and so forth, right?
Yep, all that stuff.
Dr. Fields.
Good afternoon. Well, almost. How are you, everybody? Pleased to see
Introduce
you all.
yourself.
I'm Jacqueline Fields, resident of Sandwich, Mass. And I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Fran McDonald, Vice President of Mass Maritime. And we have some wonderful news for you. So we
The
would
turbine
like...
is going to get bigger.
Oh.
By the way, thank you for your service.
Yes.
Yes.
My pleasure.
So I have recently been appointed trustee at Mass Maritime and have found that it's a fertile ground for some wonderful opportunities. And we're bringing one to you for your support and information. And would like very much for you to have this announcement. But why don't you go ahead, Fran?
Sure. Through Dr. Fields, we have been working with the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination to host an outreach conference in August. And we just got the mailing out on it late last week and early this week, but we wanted to just make sure the information got to the county. We're working closely with Barnstable County Human Rights Commission, and I leave a few of those copies up here. You
Yes.
look at that, you have it.
I gave it to her this morning.
Wow.
It just came in,
That's,
so I was putting it in my calendar this morning.
that's wonderful. But it's
Thank you.
a wonderful opportunity working with obviously the state agency, MCAD, and also with county involvement. And we've got about 500 invitations out for both a session for business and community leaders for anti-discrimination practices, and also a special session for government officials.
And that's on the 12th, Friday
Yes.
the 12th.
Yes.
Is there a time that starts? It's right 9 to 11, right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And the first day is repeat in the afternoon, and then the second day is for the government officials. But thank you for letting us bring it up at this point.
so glad you did.
Yes, and I know that from past experiences, it's very important to share anything that's going to happen in our county early on with our commissioners. So I just thought that we would come by and make sure you have it and know about it, and hope that you will be there.
So this has been sent to all of the businesses?
Yes, all the
across-
chambers,
All the
all the
chambers.
towns, all the
All the elected
selectmen,
officials.
all the elected officials.
But
and-
feel free to pass it on as well in case we missed
Okay,
anybody.
and are just members of the public invited in
Oh, yes,
general?
yes,
So everybody is
absolutely,
invited?
yes.
Okay, great.
And they're invited for August 11th.
August 11th?
Yes, August 11th is the general session, but the session on August 12th for elected officials is simply open. It's an open session, but there are new regs and information about elected officials and fire and police. So the commissioner will focus his comments on the second day to that audience.
Great.
Okay, and just to be clear, this is on the campus of the Mass Maritime
Yes. Yes.
Academy, and I think they usually have in the brick building as you go on the left, or you can have...
It's going to depend on the amount of our respondents, whether we end up in a 300-person lecture hall or an 80-person lecture hall.
Okay, so RSVP would be to ebenway@maritime.edu.
Yes, sir.
EBENWAY at maritime, MARITIME.edu. And if they sent you an email or called you, let's see, Liz Benway is your contact, at 508-830-5086, that they could get on the list to come.
Jackie, we should probably post this on the Human Rights Commission
Yes,
website.
and I'll make sure that Beth Albert has it posted on her newsletter, and other ways that individuals will be able to participate, business community as well.
Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention.
Yes.
Could I just say, I saw this for the first time yesterday and actually put it on my calendar.
Oh, great.
And I haven't responded yet, but I will. But I thought it was such a good thing to do because of the times, for one thing, in which we live. But to focus on the business and community and the elected leaders, all in the same, not together particularly, but at least in the same forum with the same information, is really important. I think it will generate conversation and dialogue, which is really important, I think, to move this forward. So I really thank you, Jackie, and for putting this together.
Our pleasure.
As well.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very nice of you to come by.
We'll look forward to seeing you.
Yes, we'll be
Right,
there.
thank you.
Maybe, Mark, you could have Kara respond for
Yeah,
us.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for the 12th.
all three of us,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that
For
way
the
we
12th,
can-
you're gonna be there on the 12th.
They'll be there definitely on the 12th if we can make it stop and see what you're saying on the 11th. I'll do it.
Employment, education, and housing. Yeah, that would be
Mhm.
kind of good to hear about. Well, it'd probably be the same thing.
Yeah,
right?
that's what, it's the same session, morning and afternoon on the 11th.
But even, well,
See, it's a repeat of session 1. So you can go either in the morning from 9 to 11
Right.
on the 11th.
that's for the business and
For the
community.
business and community people, or 1 to 3. So there's 2 different sessions on the 11th, and then,
All right, let's see, do we have any, do we have any reports?
I know I do, but I should start writing me these things down. The one thing I do want to mention that I came across this weekend is a young fellow, young boy, really, young man, who started, he's very environmentally conscious, and he started focusing on straws, nomorestraws.com, if anybody wants to take a look. I thought it was really a very benign, but it set a good tone, because this is sort of the direction we're in, just to bring people's awareness. He has started a campaign that I think has been adopted by the state of Maine or Vermont, of just making people aware that every time you get a drink, you don't have to have the straw, because it's just another landfill item that doesn't biodegrade. But particularly on a coastal system, once they get into the waters, they're very harmful to our marine life. And I know that when you go out on the whale watching boats, they allow no straws or any of that. I tried to get
a cold drink.
I know, I'm glad you didn't either.
You have a reusable.
So yes, and so I would, I'm going to get in touch with him, because I hear he's very engaging. But I just thought it was so what the campaign is that you just ask businesses to say to people, do you need that straw? It's not that they're not going to be prohibited, you're not banning anybody, you're not, if that's how they like to drink. But it raises an awareness that this straw is another piece of material that's just adding in huge amounts. So I'm going to get in touch with him, and I'm going to get back with you. But if anybody wants to think about that and learn about it, it's nomorestraws.com.
Well,
And he's a 10-year-old,
choice
and
that I
he's
use,
been
don't
interviewed
use
by the
straw.
governor of his state. He's
he
a
from
very
here?
engaging. No, he's originally from Provincetown. He was born in Provincetown, but his family now lives up in Maine. So he was visiting, and I was told about him. I didn't get a chance to meet him. I wanted to get over to him, but he'll be down again, and I will grab him. And maybe we'll bring him here, and he can tell us all about his program. But I thought for the Cape, it's just another interesting, another thing to think about that we do unconsciously.
Well, that sort of ties in with the, some restaurants will ask you if you want water or
Right.
not. And that, and that's a very useful thing, because
Yeah.
every time you use a glass of water that's put on gratuitously, the water glass has to be washed,
Right.
which means energy and hot water. And,
Right.
and
And sometimes people don't drink it, so it's wasted water.
well, that's all true. So I think that that's all part of that.
Mhm.
That it'll, let's say, if we do not use it, we don't have to worry about putting it into the waste stream. And if it doesn't go into the waste stream, it's one less thing we have to worry
Exactly
about.
right.
Now tell that to Dixie Straw up in, up in
Yeah, I know.
Chelsea.
Dixie Straw won't be happy to hear this, so they better start thinking about their business model. Paper straws coming back, even though they do collapse. I remember them well.
Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah, it was just, I can't remember else. There was other things that we done.
Okay.
They actually had some vacation time this week.
Well, I'm pleased to tell you that when I go to this NACO conference this weekend, we're actually getting an award.
Pray tell.
Well, I'm glad you asked. The pharmacy program that we've been running for some time is going to be awarded an award for high performance with regard to the outreach that we've done and the objectives that we've received on it. We've saved people, is it over $750,000 since it
Yeah,
started?
actually, I just saw the June, and I didn't get the total bill, but for the month of June, we had a total of 921 users take advantage of the program.
That is excellent.
They had an average savings off the retail price of a prescription of $13.02 or 26.5%. So I think about a quarter of the price. And a total of 2,403 prescriptions were filled using the NACO card. But that's just for the month of June.
Now, that's one program that we have, but we could use some more attention to the dental
The dental
discount.
because that's the newer one.
Right, because, and those are things that your county is trying to help,
Right.
help you out with.
And those don't cost us anything.
That's right.
Well, Bill, you brought those back, so congratulations. That was a great
It
effort.
justifies my going.
Yes, yeah, now it does. I think we should do a press release on that and give those statistics,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
actually even mention that this was the forerunner to the dental
You're full of
program,
good
which
ideas today.
exists.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
well, I mean, we could plenty of
Yes,
other
you
press,
are.
we might as well give ourselves some good press.
Yes, you
Nobody
are.
else is going to do it.
You have to give me what the award is, Bill. And
Yes,
I-
so-
I
yeah.
forwarded
No, but don't you think,
it.
yeah, it's a good way to get that out, and it's an advertising for the program
Is this the beginning
itself.
of a trend of good
Well, I
ideas?
think we need to, and then we
You're
should
right.
put it on the website.
It is.
All of that.
I just have.
There's a question from the
Well, I
audience.
just mentioned
Okay.
one of my 4 things, so I'm down to 3. But
Okay.
I wanted to remind you that there will be a memorial service
Yes.
for
in
Roland.
honor of former Bourne Selectman, former County Commissioner, and former Assembly Delegate Roland Dupont at 1 o'clock on Saturday.
This Saturday.
Saturday.
July 16th. And it's at St. Mary's Church. It's just down the street here across from the library, right down
This
here.
way.
Which way?
Oh, this
Yeah,
way.
right, that way.
Oh, yeah, okay.
What time is it again? I'm sorry.
It's 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
And I just wanted to mention, I wasn't here last Wednesday, you guys met, but Commissioner Lyons and Commissioner Doherty testified before the Joint Committee on the Judiciary last Wednesday in favor of House Bill 1304 and Senate Bill 896. That's the legislation that would increase the Registry of Deeds fees by $10. It was very busy there. They had a
lot of
huge
stuff.
agenda. And then I just wanted to mention, again, a reminder that the Cooperative Extension Tour this year will be August 17th. We did change the date, so we're going to do it on August 17th. That's the same day as the Assembly meets at the gazebo in Orleans. So what I think we're going to do, Bill Clark and I are still working on the details, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to muster at the Stop and Shop parking lot in Orleans.
Excellent.
We won't convene a meeting, but we'll just get on the bus, and he's going to do some lower and outer Cape tour sites. Then we'll get back to the
I'm so
Stop and
excited.
Shop parking lot so people can go to the Assembly meeting.
Okay,
I
now
don't
this
think we'll be
one-
that long.
Okay.
We'll have lunch
So where are we
somewhere.
going to go on the tour this time?
The itinerary is not yet
Not
set.
yet
He
set.
does have some plans. I don't know exactly what they all are. And I think we're going to have lunch in Eastham, and so lunch will be provided as well.
Now, this might be a time to, since we're talking about schedules or talking about meetings, you'd put out a,
I shared this
Right.
proposed agenda with all of you guys,
do you have-
schedule.
do you have any?
For the
comment
schedule,
on
I
it?
have no comment other than, yeah, we should, make sure that people will understand that there's going to be a couple of Wednesdays we're not having meetings.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, tentatively, where Mark Morse is supposed to come to bring the reorg report. He did call me the other day. I know he was having a tooth problem, but he never got back. He said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be there Wednesday the 20th. So right now, he's on. So I'll let you know.
But he is going to send it to us. I mean, he's going to send us.
He's supposed to send the report.
Prior
yes.
to his
Yes,
being here.
I will ask
Okay,
him
so
for
that we can
yes.
read
I
it,
will, yeah.
so we can have
even if we
questions
don't do it
and that'll
next Wednesday,
expedite
I'll
that.
get the report from him.
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
And then the 27th, we were not meeting. And then the 3rd, Rob and Henri were supposed to come back.
Yes.
Then the 10th, we were not meeting. This is August. And then the 17th, we're doing this.
So as far as, we had one evening meeting that was not really well attended, I think that we ought to start thinking for the fall as far as how many evening meetings we would have
Right.
in any particular month.
Well,
And I think that we should, I'm sorry, but make sure that word gets out to those areas wherever if we have it or if we're having it in the evening. And I did feel that summer wasn't the right time to sort of launch a new times after we were there. So I think it's good to think about.
And I think the other thing we need to do is to craft our agenda so that the meeting that we have in the evening is a really relevant agenda that would interest people in coming.
Right.
So I don't think we should just have it in the evening to have a
Just
meeting.
have,
But
right.
we should have a really we should have an appropriate agenda.
Or maybe we should take it on the road too. Remember we did those
Yeah.
a couple, was it this board? I'm not, I get so confused.
I know we've done
We
it.
went to Bourne and we went
Well,
to
yes, actually, we did.
Chatham.
We went to Bourne. all
Mhm.
three.
No,
Yeah,
not
I think
just-
so.
But, we did have a meeting of board, but it was during the
But
day.
that was a different, yeah,
was
that
a
was different about
What
the,
was that? Was
well,
it
that was
the
about the thrift shop.
No,
Yeah, we
we
had
went
that.
to the thrift shop.
And then the
Had our-
No,
one in the
thinking-
evening was about solid
Tom
waste. We
Green-
went to the
Tom
high
Green
school with
Right, it
Tom
was in the
Green.
evening at the
Yeah.
community center, and Tom Marino was the only one who showed up.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I agree, it's kind of a two-part. It's maybe take these on the road and have them somewhere, but then you have to have a specific agenda that's relevant.
Right, that's
to
relevant
where
to
you
that
are.
area. So
Yeah.
that wouldn't be a bad, even if you wanted to do like 3 different
Yeah.
meetings
Yeah.
off of this campus.
I remember
And
having a
that's-
DCPC
that's-
meeting up in Bourne years ago where we had it in the library and we had people from all over the Upper Cape. It wasn't a county commission meeting. That was when I was still in the assembly and we were looking at that. And that was relevant,
For our time.
and topic and so forth.
Yeah, so we could spend maybe, a day in September kind of planning that out
Planning
for
it
the
out,
rest of
yeah.
the year.
Okay,
If
well,
I may just bring up something that was discussed last week, we had people here from, and I'm not carrying water, but I did say that we would maybe discuss this in 2 weeks, which would be next week.
is that on the agenda?
They were talking about, they had discussed, when are you going to put us on the agenda so that we can have some answers or some discussion about things that we have sent you. And one of them was the petition that has been sent around, and I have read the petition, and they have requested numerous times to be put on the agenda, and we're sort of just letting, not giving them an answer one way or another. I have no problem in discussing that petition. I think that it would just create a conversation. I'm not I can express my feelings about the petition at that time, but I think that in fairness and in openness, we have nothing to that we're afraid to talk about. So I think that we should at least put that on the agenda. I would request it.
Well, I hear you, but if you intend to have it on the agenda, it has never been clear to me exactly what we would be talking about.
Well, on
So I
that
think-
petition, they wanted us to take up resolutions, and they proposed resolutions. Now, we don't have to take them up. We can discuss those resolutions and why we would be interested in having them as a resolution or not. I don't look at them as resolutions that I would want to go put forward, and I am happy to discuss why. And to have a conversation around that, but
So
I think
instead
that
of
they
a
need,
petition,
they want some, they want to just
Just so I'll understand, you want to have
have a discussion about the resolutions that are within the petition.
I see.
So I don't have, and if you read those resolutions, I mean, I think that we could all very honestly speak to them, and it would have a conversation that they're looking to have, and I have no problems in saying why I would be not in favor of passing those resolutions.
Do you have any comment on that?
Well, I haven't looked at them since the time they gave them to me, so I'd have to really go back and read them again and think about them in terms of whether they're within our jurisdiction,
Yeah.
to even deal with them. I don't know, so let's
Yeah,
let's do our homework, and then I can let Mark know. what
If
I
you
think.
could do that,
Okay, yeah,
because
I need to
the first thing
communicate
on
through him.
rules governing procedure, it says very
Is
specifically,
that the book you carry with you now?
Well, it's also though,
I know,
actually, this is for the
for
assembly.
legislative,
But
which
I'm
is
going to
different.
send this over to the
But
assembly.
anyway, what were you going
they'll
to
be
say?
happy about that.
What were you going to say, Bill?
No, I was going to say that the first rule of any deliberation is if we have jurisdiction with regard to, CVEC and Cape Country. We have jurisdiction with regard to the administrative services agreement, because that's what all three of us
Well-
signed in April of 2009.
But there's already 2 venues coming up. One is Rob and the special commission is going to take up the review of CVEC and the compact and part of their strategies. And also CVEC, we've asked them to hold that public forum, and they are going to do it. So we don't want, we need
The
to
assembly is-
get some, and the assembly now, I think, although
Who's going to do an investigative?
they want to do it, I think their vote was not a legal vote, though, from what I read. because they didn't have enough of a
I saw Bob
majority. or
had
members.
issued an opinion.
There was some issue with the way it was voted, but I know they want to have this special committee to look into it. So there's a lot of things going on with it.
So, since we had all voted and signed a letter asking CVAC to do something, CVAC, with regard to this issue,
Yeah, but she's talking about the resolutions.
Oh, the resolution.
I don't.
Yeah, I mean, they requested it, they've requested it numerous times.
Okay.
I don't think it's a problem just to address it in a very open way, and we can have a discussion as to where we agree and disagree, and give them, I mean, they've asked many weeks in a row. The other question I request is that when, I'm getting these opinions from our attorney, and I'm not really sure what the question is that he's answering all the time. So when you
He's answering
propose a
Bill's
question to Attorney Troy, could you share that question with us so that we know what the question is that he's sending back to us, what that response is?
actually, and if you read his report, he frames the
He
question.
frames the question.
He frames the question that it was posed.
I understand, but when you send him those letters, because we might have a take on some of those questions as well, so while he's at it.
Since that, I would take exception to that for this reason. Since I'm the one that's asking for the opinion and not asking for your permission to get the opinion, I don't think that I don't think I have to send it to you ahead of time. However, I have shared with you the response that comes out, and I would wonder why you would want to know what I'm asking about myself.
Well, number one, it was good to know that you were asking those questions, and number two, I might have further thoughts on a similar question or.
But I think there's two answers to this question.
Yeah.
Because Bill is talking about these conflict of interest.
Right, so he's asking for specific person.
He's sort of got a privilege there.
Right.
However, in general, yes, the answer is sure. We don't have any problem.
Absolutely
Usually
not.
what you do is
If I'm asking
Bob
something
almost
for all of
always
us.
insists on the question in writing so he knows sort of
Right.
where the starting point is. Then he, in his opinion, regurgitates the question so you can say, no, that's not what I meant to ask,
Right.
basically.
And I think, too, Bill was responding to challenges to his positions as
Right.
chair of the
Correct.
commission and chair of the compact. And so he's asking our own town council, not only from the conflict of interest law, really in terms of responding to the challenges to that, which I thought the response was very interesting and very helpful, because I think of the different, you're on different boards and committees too.
It's helpful
you
and
have
it's
to-
not, and it's unclear, so I will appreciate Bob coming in here. I know he was here today,
Yeah.
so I would like to discuss that with him, because in some ways his citing passages from the charter about our oversight, our connection to any of the organizations that are affiliated with us, almost lent that we do have more oversight, than we have broader powers than what might be in an intergovernmental agreement, because they're being superseded by general law. So I would like to have that discussion with him.
Oh, but that's a different
That's a different
discussion from
discussion
just
in
him
mine.
getting
I know it's a different
an opinion on
discussion.
conflict of interest.
Well, he has sent us several opinions, and I think it would be helpful.
He's
How
got-
can we arrange
No,
to have him?
He cited the charter to support his response.
I understand.
So if we want to have him come in and talk to us about charter
So I
provisions.
have to issue
That
him a
would-
question. Yeah, no, I
Is that
think-
what you wanted
Yeah,
to
I
talk
want him to
about?
come in and
Our powers
to
under
talk
the
about
charter?
that. Yeah, to talk about those specific, because in some ways you're saying that you don't really have oversight here on this passage because it's an intergovernmental agreement. And then when he was supporting actually another point, he brought up the charter and where our power is given to us as we were established and recognized by the voters and the general court, that our powers are more broad in those different areas. So I would like a clarification on that.
Yeah.
Well, again, with regard to the two
Specific
agencies,
areas.
Specific areas. Number one, since the Cape Light Compact is is based on an operating agreement that was passed by either town council or town meeting in 21 different towns, and that we are a member of it and not, responsible for writing the checks, and like we did with the sheriff, we don't really have oversight over their actions. The other thing I would mention to you is that with regard to the Cape Light Compact, their financial transactions are included in the audit that the Assembly has of the operation of Barnstable County. And in the 9 years, or the amount of time that the Cape Light Compact has been in existence, there has never been a finding that related to any of the financial transactions with regard to the Cape Light Compact, because every one of the Cape Light Compact votes to support a financial transfer by the 21 towns, and not including my vote, were as a result of a board action, so therefore they were consistent with the operation of the Cape Light Compact.
I understand that.
Okay.
That's not my question. I was talking about the question of oversight, because even though...
Oversight of what?
The oversight of those, in that discussion that he has, he states, he's answering your question, but he states in a section that there is, since we therefore do not have direct oversight because it's a 21-member board. However, later he goes into the powers that have been given to the regional government, and he states several times that they are purposely broad and to encompass some of these governmental agencies that are attached to us. And it wasn't clear to me. I think it's a matter of, it could be argued that the language in our charter gives us more oversight than, and it supersedes an intergovernmental agreement. So I would like to have that discussion. That's what I could be wrong.
I think we're veering into
Please.
deliberation on something that's not on the agenda.
Okay.
This is why I'm a little concerned.
All right, that
Because
is,
I think the question is when and how
I
do
am
we
not
put this on the agenda?
That's-
It is a
we should
larger
put it on
question.
the
it is a larger
It's a larger
question, and I'm
question.
not saying that I'm not saying I have an answer here. What I'm saying is it raised this question in my mind, and I'd like to have a discussion about it.
And I have a different understanding of that, so I think it would be good
Yeah.
to have him come in and discuss.
Right.
But I
In
think we
terms
have
of,
to be
in
clear
terms
as to what
of
we're
the
asking them to
regional
come in.
government and our role and our
I'll be happy to
ability
find the
to be
question.
able to function on different boards and
Now,
committees.
and since we're in the process of having Rob O'Leary and Arnie Rauschenbach look at this, I thought that that was part of what they would look at.
I absolutely
as far
hope they
as,
do.
As far as that,
The structure.
the interplay. And I wonder, in terms of timing, which comes first? Does their opinion with regard to, because remember, Rob was here at the beginning of the charter piece, because he was a county commissioner then, and Arnie Rauschenbach was part of the legislative process
Right.
that created that. I wonder if their opinion with regard to intent at the beginning would be an important piece to have, let's say, to have explained to us before we get, let's say, to compare to what information we get from.
I've had a
Bill,
conversation with Rob about his intent.
This is
We
a
had.
totally different thing now, but I think you have Rob and
Right.
Andre doing this. You're going to have another committee from the Assembly of Delegates looking at it, and you're going to have CBEC responding to it. I think that we should, I don't think that there's any great sense of urgency about this. I mean, this isn't something you have to just respond to immediately. I think it has to be done in a very thoughtful and legal fashion.
No, I
So I
agree.
think we have to wait for these people to do what they have agreed to do, and then come back with their work, whatever that might be, or
And
their
then at
opinions, or
that
their
point, I think we would-
conclusions, whatever that might be.
And I think at that point, we would benefit from the advice of counsel.
No, but that is a different issue. than
Mine's a different
jailhouse.
question.
That's totally different
I'm just,
from.
Well, we're just talking.
Yes, and I'm just saying that, does this mean this? I mean, that's all, and I just want to clarify. I'm not saying that I'm assuming that I'm right or wrong. It just seemed to me one contradicted the other, and I would just like,
I understand
forward.
exactly
You understand
what
what I'm
you
saying?
say. I
And
do.
you know the passage I'm talking about.
Yep, I do.
Right.
Absolutely.
So-
And I think.
And that would put a lot of people-
Bob could come in, and actually, I think it would be very
very useful
and
for
very
everyone.
helpful for us to have
Okay.
that discussion.
When would
with
you
him.
like to have that discussion?
Whenever
If we
he's
could have that
available.
discussion next week, that would be terrific.
Yeah, I can find out if Mr. Troy is available.
Okay.
Yeah, or the first Wednesday he is available.
Because it was very interesting to read his interpretation of the charter in terms of our powers as the regional government and our role as commissioners, and the broad the broad involvement we can have at the
Exactly.
county in working with different groups, agencies, and organizations. Yeah, and I think that
Right.
that would be a very
Okay,
interesting
so
discussion to
there's
have.
two things that we've been actually brought up under new
Right.
business. One was that, and the other one was, you're going to
Read the
deci-
resolutions.
read the
and
resolution,
write-
decide
send a
whether or
comment
not
tomorrow.
Right.
I'm not
support
deciding,
that.
I'm going
Well,
to give
you-
my
No, but-
You can't decide.
No,
You can't
but
decide.
I mean, if
My
you're
opinions
open to
tomorrow.
discussing that for next
Yes.
week,
All right,
yes.
that's, okay, but I'd
Okay.
like both of
Yeah,
you
right
to
there.
give an
Okay,
opinion
well,
on
you're,
that.
well, you know my opinion,
Yes, I
so
heard
now
that.
you're just waiting for.
Okay, so with
Okay.
that, with that opinion in hand, then we could, we could decide whether or not we'll
Right.
go forward with that discussion.
Yeah, let me
Okay, so
just
let's
make
not
sure
sign.
we're careful about what we just said. You can't deliberate through email.
That's
So-
right, I'm not deliberating.
Right.
She's gonna say, I
opinions
agree
Yeah,
with you.
exactly.
She says it's not to us.
She's just
it's
saying to you
you.
that I agree that this is a good agenda.
I'm
item,
not
that's all.
sending it
It's
to
not
them.
deliberating.
Okay, very good.
She's not gonna tell us her opinion.
To me, that's
I'm only
part of-
sending it to
within the
Mark. If
scope
you
of
want to
Just
new
gotta be
know,
very careful
call Mark.
nowadays.
Right. So this would be within the scope of new business that we're taking up, or that we propose to take up.
Yes, it's a topic
That's
for
correct.
another meeting.
Yes.
Exactly.
All right. So with that, we've approved all the, we've got your report. Do we have anything from Maggie that she shared with us?
No, she didn't give me anything today.
Okay. And we're meeting at 1 o'clock next week?
You don't think we said, did we say? 1 o'clock, yeah, that's when I invited Mark, that's correct.
Okay, all right. So I should be back by then.
So that is tentative.
All right. Okay, so with that, with the exception of signing papers, I think.
We're done?
We're
Yes.
So we'll take a motion.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Questions from the press?